The sound came from the bushes like a wounded breath, dry and broken, and Reed Carter froze with his rifle halfway raised. The creek bed in front of him had been dead for months, nothing but cracked mud and weeds burned white by the sun. Oh man, should have been there. No animal either. Then a tall shape burst out of the brush and fell hard to the ground. Reed lifted his rifle fully, finger tight on the trigger, heart pounding. What lay before him was not a man at all, but an Apache. Woman, covered in dust and dried blood, her body shaking as she fought for air. Her arms were thin but strong, veins standing out beneath torn skin. One arm hung stiff and raw, clearly broken. Her legs were scraped raw, blood crusted along her calves. Her face was darkened by sun and pain, yet her eyes burned sharp and alive. She lifted both hands slowly, forcing the words out through cracked lips. "Do not shoot. I can bear you children. Just let me live." The words struck Red harder than any bullet. For a moment, he did not move. The image of his dead wife flashed through his mind, her body weak with fever, her eyes begging him for help. He could not give. Reed lowered the rifle. Without speaking, he pulled the canteen from his belt and tossed it onto the dirt in front of her. "Drink it, then come with me." The woman did not thank him. She grabbed the water with shaking hands and drank every drop, then pushed herself to her feet. Her name, he would later learn, was Takina. Though he would come to call her Tina, she followed him toward the ranch, her steps uneven but steady, each one echoing behind him like a promise he did not yet understand. Reed knew as he walked that his quiet life had just ended. That night, Tina stayed in the corner of the horse stable, her back pressed to the wooden wall, a small knife clutched tight in her hand. Her eyes stayed open in the dark, watching every shadow. From the porch, Reed watched her without speaking. He was not used to sharing his land, especially not with an Apache woman. The town nearby would call her an enemy. Trouble, something to be chased off or killed. Yet when morning came, Reed stepped outside and found her already awake, drawing water from the well, washing her face, then cleaning the stable without being asked by midday. A young calf broke loose near the damaged fence. Reed reached for his rope, but Tina moved first. Limping but fast, she rushed ahead and guided the calf back into the pen, slamming the gate shut with practiced hands. She stood there, breathing hard, sweat and dust streaking her face, her eyes still sharp with strength. Reed watched her for a long moment. He gave a small nod, then went back to hammering stakes into the ground. He did not need words to see what kind of woman she was. As the sun fell low, Tina built a small fire outside the stable and roasted dried meat she had carried with her. Reed came out quietly and set down a tin mug of warm milk beside the fire. She looked up at him, her eyes less guarded now, though still careful. That night, the wind moved through the fields like a low song. Reed stood on the porch, listening, aware that the ranch no longer felt as empty as it once had. There was another presence now, strong and unbroken, breathing life back into the silence. Later that evening, dark clouds rolled in and the air grew heavy. Reed heard a faint cough from the stable and went to look. Tina sat with her knees drawn up, her skin hot with fever, her body trembling. The cut on her leg was swollen and angry, thick with infection. Reed brought hot water, a clean cloth, and a knife heated red. Tina clenched her teeth as he worked, never crying out once. When he finished, he set a thick blanket beside her and told her to rest. Rain began to fall soon after, hard against the tin roof. When night deepened, Tina appeared at the cabin door, soaked from the rain. Reed let her inside. They sat by the fire in silence until she spoke of her sister, captured and killed, and of running alone through the dark to survive. Reed told her of his wife and son taken by fever, of a house once full of laughter, now filled only with wind. They said no more than that. The fire burned low, but the space between them felt warmer than before. The next morning, Reed found fresh hoofprints near the northern fence. Not cattle, not local horses. Someone had come close in the night. When he told Tina, her eyes darkened. "They might come back," she said. Reed knew the safest choice was to send her away. Yet when he looked at her standing there, wounded but unshaken, something tightened in his chest. "You can leave now," he said slowly. She picked up her knife and met his gaze. "I have been running long enough." Reed nodded once. "Then we get ready." All afternoon, the ranch changed shape under their hands. Reed worked the cabin first, nailing thick boards across the windows, testing each one with his shoulder until the wood held firm. He reinforced the doors with iron brackets and heavy beams cut from an old cottonwood tree. Every strike of the hammer echoed across the land like a warning. Tina worked without pause, dragging dry straw away from the cabin so fire could not take hold. Stacking wood in neat piles, digging shallow trenches around the stable. Her limp slowed her, but it did not stop her. Pain was something she had learned to carry without complaint. When the sun dipped low, Reed pulled a chair onto the porch and rested his rifle across his lap. Tina sat near the stable door, her spear planted in the dirt, her back straight and ready. They did not speak. They did not need to. The silence between them felt heavy, but not empty. It felt like two people standing on the edge of the same storm, aware that once it broke, nothing would ever be the same. The night wind carried a bitter smell, scorched grass from somewhere far away. Reed tightened his grip on the rifle. He knew men like the ones who hunted her. They would return, driven by pride and cruelty more than sense. He also knew that once blood was spilled on this land, there would be no turning back. Yet, as he glanced toward Tina, steady and unafraid, he felt something he had not felt in years. He was not standing alone. The next day burned hot and bright. Reed carried nails and tools into the field, while Tina followed with water. They repaired fences, stretched new wire, drove posts deep into the dry earth. Reed was used to the quiet rhythm of working alone, but now the sound of another hammer striking beside his felt strange and right at the same time. Tina worked with strong, sure movements. Sweat darkened her clothes. Dust clung to her skin. But her focus never wavered. Near midday, a length of wire snapped loose and whipped across the back of Reed's hand. Blood welled up instantly. He hissed in pain, but before he could react, Tina was there. She took his hand gently, her touch firm but careful. "Let me see," she said. Reed sat on a wooden post and watched as she wrapped the wound with a clean strip of cloth. Her hands, rough from survival, were surprisingly gentle. When he looked up, their eyes met, held by the bright afternoon light. "Thank you," he said quietly. Tina nodded once and returned to her work. By late afternoon, they pushed the cattle back into the pen. Red dust swirled around their legs as the sun sank low, stretching their shadows across the ground. When the herd finally settled, both of them stood breathing hard, worn down by the long day. That night, they sat inside the cabin by the fire. Reed poured coffee and handed her a cup. Tina took a small sip and set it down. The moment hung between them, tight with unspoken feeling. Slowly, without rushing, they leaned toward each other. The kiss was quiet and certain, like something that had been waiting for the right moment to exist. When it ended, neither spoke. Tina turned away, but a small smile touched her mouth, the first real one Reed had seen. Sleep came easily to Reed. That night, the wind no longer sounded lonely. The following afternoon, the sky turned gray and still. Reed heard hoofbeats before he saw them. 3 riders approached, dust rising behind them. Reed stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Tina came out of the stable, spear held low but ready. The men stopped at the gate. The leader's smile was sharp and ugly. "We heard there's an Apache hiding out here," he said. "Hand her over and you keep your peace." "There's no one here but me," Reed answered. Tina stepped forward into full view, standing beside him, scars clear on her skin, her gaze unflinching. "She stays," Reed said. "This is my land." The leader sneered and promised they would return. When they rode off, the dust hung in the air like a threat that refused to settle. That night, the rain came hard. Thunder rolled over the plains. Reed sat inside with his rifle laid across the table. The barn door creaked in the wind. He grabbed the lantern and stepped outside. The light revealed Tina walking toward the fence, a bag on her back. She froze when he called her name. "I cannot let you lose everything because of me," she said. Reed stepped into the rain, anger and fear mixing in his chest. "I would rather lose this ranch than lose you," he shouted. The words broke something open between them. Tina dropped the bag and walked back to him. Together, they returned to the cabin, the fire flaring bright as if it knew what was coming. At sunrise, the sky burned red. Reed loaded his rifle. Tina tied her hair back, spear by the door. Hooves thundered in the distance, louder this time. 5 riders appeared at the gate. The leader gave one last warning. Reed raised the rifle. Tina stepped beside him, unshaken. The first shot cracked through the morning air, and the land held its breath. The first gunshot split the morning like thunder. The leader's horse screamed as the bullet struck the post inches from its chest, rearing back in panic. Dust exploded into the air. For one sharp moment, everything stood still. Then the riders drew their guns and fired wildly toward the porch. Reed and Tina dropped behind the sandbags as bullets tore into wood and dirt. Reed fired back with calm precision, each shot measured, each breath steady. Tina moved beside him like a shadow, her spear ready. Her eyes never leaving the field, the air filled with smoke and the sharp smell of gunpowder. One rider shouted in fear as his horse stumbled and spun away. Another bullet struck the cabin, wall sending splinters flying. Reed shifted his position and fired again. A man cried out, clutching his arm as his horse bolted. The fight did not last long. The riders had not expected resistance. They had not expected unity. Within minutes, they turned and fled, firing backward as they ran, leaving only churned earth and fading hoofbeats behind them. Silence fell hard and heavy. Reed stayed still for a long breath, rifle still raised, eyes scanning the land. Only when the dust settled did he lower the gun. Tina stood slowly, her chest rising and falling, her grip tight on the spear. They looked at each other, neither smiling, neither speaking, both understanding what they had just survived. The ranch stood quiet again, scarred but standing. That afternoon, they walked the land together. They checked fences, counted cattle, repaired what the bullets had damaged. Their movements were slower now, careful, the weight of the morning still hanging over them. When the last board was nailed back into place, Reed leaned against a post and wiped the sweat from his brow. Tina stepped beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "It is finished," she said softly. Reed nodded. "They will not come back," as evening fell. The sky softened into gold and red. They sat on the porch steps, watching the light stretch across the prairie. The land felt different now. It no longer felt like a place Reed guarded out of habit or memory. It felt alive again. Tina reached for his hand, her fingers rough and warm against his calloused palm. "This ranch," she said, after a moment, "it is mine now too." Reed squeezed her hand gently. "And you are not going anywhere?" Days passed, then weeks. Word spread quickly through the nearby towns. Some whispered of a rancher who had lost his fear. Others spoke of an Apache woman who stood her ground like iron. No one came to test them again. Life settled into a new rhythm. Tina helped with the cattle, the fences, the long days under the sun. Reed taught her the ways of the land he had learned over years of solitude. At night, they shared quiet meals and quiet thoughts, the firelight, filling the spaces that grief once ruled. One evening, as the stars burned bright above the open land, Tina stood beside Reed on the porch. She was quieter than usual, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Reed noticed and turned to her. "What is it?" he asked. She met his eyes, her voice steady, but full of something deep and trembling. "I will have your baby." The words hung in the air, simple and powerful. Reed felt the breath leave his chest. For a moment, the world seemed too big and too small all at once. He did not speak right away. He looked out across the land, the fences standing straight, the cattle calm, the home rebuilt from silence and blood. Then he looked back at her. His eyes shone, not with fear, but with something like hope. "Then we will raise a child who knows strength," he said. "A child who knows this land is worth protecting." Tina nodded, her lips lifting into a soft smile. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her close as the night deepened. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to cooler days. Tina's steps grew slower, her belly round with life. Reed worked harder than ever, preparing the ranch, fixing every loose board, every broken rail. He wanted the world ready for what was coming. On a quiet autumn morning, as the sun rose pale and gentle, Tina gave birth inside the cabin. Reed stayed close, his hand never leaving hers. When the cry of the child filled the room, strong and clear, Reed felt tears fall freely for the first time in many years. They named the child with care, honoring both worlds, both pasts. The ranch echoed with a new sound now. Laughter, soft. Footsteps, a future. The land that once held only loss now held promise. Reed often stood at the fence at dusk, watching Tina walk with the child in her arms, the prairie stretching wide behind her. He knew love like this was not gentle or easy. It was built in fire and blood and choice. In the harsh West, love was not spoken lightly. It was proven. It stood its ground. And on that quiet ranch, where two broken souls once met by chance, love did more than survive. It gave life, and it turned wild earth into a home.